Welcome back to Mr. DuPage's classroom. This lesson is for my Algebra 2 class. It is section 3.6, day 3 notes. Today we're going to write a polynomial function with a leading coefficient of 1 with the following roots. What that means is they are giving us the answers. We have 1, 2, and 3 as answers. Well, how did we figure out those answers in the past? Well, if we had something along the lines of x plus 1 equals 0, we would subtract 1, so x would equal negative 1. That negative 1 that I just showed you would be what the number is that they have given us. So what we need to do is we need to go back one step and have x and that number, the opposite of that number, equal to 0. So what we're going to do, we're going to write f of x is equal to, this positive 1 is going to turn into x minus 1. This positive 2 will turn into x minus 2, and the positive 3 will turn into x minus 3. All we did is we went from this line back up to that line, okay? Now from here, it's all review. Basically what we're going to do now is we are going to do double distribution. So it would be x times x, which is x squared, x times negative 2, which is negative 2x, negative 1 times x, which is negative x, and negative 1 times negative 2, which is positive 2. I'm going to put that in a set of parentheses and leave my x minus 3 on the outside. I want to combine like terms in my first set of parentheses. My like terms are negative 2x and negative x, so I'm going to have x squared minus 3x plus 2 times x minus 3. If I do distribution again, I'm going to end up with x to the third minus 3x squared. Then negative 3 times x would be negative 3x squared. Negative 3x times negative 3 would be positive 9x. Then I would have positive 2 times x, which is positive 2x, and positive 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. The final step is just to combine like terms. So I have x to the third. Is there another x to the third? No, there's not. So I'm done with x to the third. Now I have negative 3x squared and negative 3x squared, which would be negative 6x squared. I have positive 9x and positive 2x, which is positive 11x, and then negative 6 is by itself. So that will be my answer. So essentially what we're doing is we're going from our answer back to the original polynomial and being able to write a polynomial function. Now, problem number 2, it's the exact same process. I just happen to have 4 terms now. So it would be f of x would equal x plus 1, x plus 2, x minus 3, and x minus 4. Again, I want to use the opposite of the number that was given to me. Okay? Now I'm going to use double distribution on the first two. So x times x is x squared. X times positive 2 is positive 2x. 1 times x is positive x. 1 times 2 is positive 2. Now, instead of just continuously multiplying by the next group and the next group and the next group, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use double distribution on these two as well. So this would be x squared. That would be negative 4x. This would be negative 3x. And then negative 3 times negative 4 would be positive 12. I'm going to combine like terms in both my sets of parentheses individually, though. So the first set is x squared. Then I would have positive 2x plus x, which would be positive 3x. And then I just have the positive 2. In the second set of parentheses, again, I just have an x squared by itself. Negative 4x, negative 3x, so that would be negative 7x. And then the positive 12 is by itself. Now, at this point, what I need to do is I need to multiply everything from the first set of parentheses by everything in the second set of parentheses. The first thing I'm going to multiply is the x squared from my first set of parentheses. So x squared times x squared would be x to the fourth. X squared times negative 7x would be negative 7x to the third. X squared times 12 would be positive 12x squared. The next group would be the 3x. 3x times x squared would be positive 3x to the third. 3x times negative 7 would be negative 21x squared. 3x times 12 would be positive 36x. Finally, the 2 times everything. 2 times x squared would be positive 2x squared. I'm going to run out of room, so I need to drop down a little bit. Hopefully on your paper you can continue writing this, but just realize I dropped down a line. 2 times negative 7 is negative 14x. 2 times 12 would be positive 24. Now, I have this big long line of things. We have done this in the past. All we're going to do is combine like terms. So I have x to the fourth. There's no other x to the fourth in my problem. Now I have negative 7x to the third. I have positive 3x to the third. Are there any other x to the thirds? No, there's not. So negative 7 plus 3 would be negative 4x to the third. I now have positive 12x squared minus 21x squared plus 2x squared. So 12 minus 21 would be negative 9, plus 2 would be negative 7x squared. Now I have positive 36x and negative 14x, so 36 minus 14 would get me 22, so positive 22x. The final piece is the positive 24 all by itself, and we are good. That would be our answer right here. Okay? On to problem number 3. Again, I have 4 terms. The 0, don't let it freak you out. All you have to do is add it in with the x. So f of x equals, that's a negative 3, so it would be x plus 3. That's a 0, so it would be x minus 0. 1, I'd have x minus 1. And 4 would be x minus 4. Again, I'm going to multiply the first 2 parentheses together and the second 2 parentheses together. Then I'll end up multiplying everything at the end. So it'll be x times x, which is x squared. X times negative 0 would be 0x. Since it's 0x, I don't need to write it. Then I'd have 3 times x would be positive 3x. And 3 times 0, again, 3 times 0 is 0, so again, I would not need to write that. Then I have x times x, which would be x squared. X times negative 4 is negative 4x. Negative 1 times x is negative x. Negative 1 times negative 4 is positive 4. In the first set of parentheses, I want to see if I can combine like terms. Well, I have an x squared and just an x, so I cannot. The second set of parentheses, however, I can. I'm going to leave the first set of parentheses alone. In the second set of parentheses, there's nothing that goes with x squared. But negative 4x and negative x would make negative 5x plus 4. Now, to finish it off, I need to multiply x squared times everything. So that would be x to the fourth. X squared times negative 5 would be negative 5x cubed. X squared times 4 would be positive 4x squared. 3 times x squared would be positive 3x cubed. 3x times negative 5x would be negative 15x squared, and 3x times 4 would be positive 12x. Now all I have to do is combine like terms. I have an x to the fourth, another x to the fourth. There is not one. I have the negative 5x to the third, and a positive 3x to the third, so I would get negative 2x to the third. Then I have positive 4x squared and negative 15x squared. So that would be a negative 11x squared. Finally, I just have the positive 12x by itself. So that would be my answer. Okay? Now, problems 4 and 5 are a little bit different. It's not a big deal, but we do have one new thing that we have to worry about. Since I have an I need to always add a negative I. So if I had just a negative I up there, I would have to add a positive I. The reason why that is because in order to get I would have to take the square root of a negative 1. Anytime I take the square root of something, I have a positive and a negative of the same thing, right? So now, since I've added that, all I'm going to do is write out my problem. So x plus 3 times x minus I comes from this I, and x plus I comes from that I. I'm going to treat them just like their numbers, okay? But here is where we really need to be careful. Instead of multiplying x plus 3 and x minus I first, what I want to do, because it'll get rid of my i's, is I want to multiply the x minus I times the x plus I. So it'll be x times x. Don't forget about your x plus 3, I apologize. X times x would be x squared. X times I would be positive xi. Negative I times x would be not positive, sorry. Negative x times I. And negative I times positive I would give us a negative I squared. Now, let's try to remember back to when we did square roots. What did I squared stand for? Well, or I stand for? Well, I stood for I equaled negative 1. Well, right now I have a negative I squared. So if I had a negative I squared, I would have, I'm sorry, it's the square root of negative 1, I apologize. So if I have I squared, that would be the square root of negative 1 squared. Now, if that's the case, then this square root and that squared would go away, so it would really just equal negative 1. So, I squared equals negative 1. We need to remember that, okay? I want to combine like terms. So this would be x plus 3. This would be x squared. Positive xi minus xi is just going to cancel out. Then I have a negative times negative 1. Well, instead of writing negative times negative 1, if I distribute the negative into negative 1, that would make it a positive 1. So that's all I have left. Now I take x times x squared, give me x to the third. X times 1 would be positive x. 3 times x squared would be positive 3x squared. And 3 times 1 would be positive 3. The only thing that's left to do is write it in standard form. So x to the third plus 3x squared plus x plus 3. If you have any questions about the I situation, please make sure you come in before school or before class and ask. Just like I had with the I situation, if I have a square root as one of my answers, I need to add the opposite square root as well. Because again, anytime I take a square root of anything, it's going to give me a positive and a negative. So now I take f of x. I want to put the square roots together. So it would be x minus the square root of 2 and x plus the square root of 2 times x plus 1. Well, x times x would get me x squared. X times the square root of 2 would give me positive x root 2. Negative 2 times x would be negative x root 2. And the square root of negative 2, or the square root of negative 2 times the square root of negative 2, that would be the same thing as saying, you don't need to write this down, just pay attention. The square root of negative 2 times the square root of negative 2 is the same thing as the square root of 2 squared. So if I multiply those together, what's left is just 2. Again, you did not need to write that down. So I have the negative square root of 2 times the positive square root of 2, which would give me a negative 2. Don't forget about your x plus 1. Now what I'm going to do from here is I want to combine like terms. So I have x squared. This positive x root 2 and negative x root 2 will cancel. I'm just left with the negative 2, okay, times x plus 1. So I'll take x squared times x, which would be x to the third. X squared times 1 would be positive x squared. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x, and negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. And that would be my answer. On to the final problem. This time it says we need to use a leading coefficient of negative 2. So most of this is exactly the same. The only difference is this negative 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write negative 2 out front. So I've taken care of that negative 2. Just write negative 2 down. Don't worry about it after that, okay, until the very, very end. The rest of it is exactly the same. So it would be x plus 2 from negative 2, x minus 0 from 0, and x minus 5 from positive 5. Okay? So now I'm going to write down negative 2 because I don't want to mess with it yet. I'm going to multiply x times x, which is x squared. X times 0 would be 0x. We don't need to worry about writing it down. 2 times x is positive 2x. And 2 times 0 would be 0, so I don't need to worry about writing that down. Now, I need my x minus 5, so x squared times x would get me x cubed. X squared times negative 5 would be negative 5x squared. 2x times x would be positive 2x squared. And 2x times negative 5 would be negative 10x. The final step, and really the only time that negative 2 comes into play, is right now. I just need to distribute the negative 2 to everything. So it would be negative 2 times x cubed. So I get negative 2x cubed. Negative 2 times negative 5x squared would be positive 10x squared. Negative 2 times positive 2x squared would be negative 4x squared. Negative 2 times negative 10x would be positive 10x. And we are done. All right. Well, that is the end of the lesson. Just remember, the most important thing is that whatever number they give me, I need to put it inside of a parenthesis with an x, but using the opposite number. So if it gives me a 1, I will use x minus 1. If it gives me a 2, I would use x minus 2. If it gave me a negative 1, I would use x plus 1. That is the end of our lesson. Be sure that if you have any questions, you either come in before school or ask me right before class. And otherwise, thank you very much for watching the video, and have a great day.